to continue the agenda of this first day in our 13th Energy Congress, we would like to give the floor to Jorge Alberto Valencia, Executive Director of CREG, who will going to speak about the regulatory outlook given the dynamics of the electricity sector. He has been in CREG since January 2020, and he is a civil engineer of the School of Engineering of Antioquia with a master's degree in management and in international business of Universidad Afit of Medellín. He has been working with the public sector for over 22 years. He was director of the Energy Mining Planning Unit, and he was technical secretary of the Advising Committee, CAC, and he also worked in the area of interconnection in Eléctrica S.A. and in Codensa. So you have the floor, Mr. Valencia. Thank you very much to Acolgen for this invitation to such an important event, and on behalf of CREG, I would like to tell you which are the topics we're working on in regulation for that energy transition that, as we have seen, it is not stopping. Actually, it is growing with the decisions of the Senate of the Republic and of the national government of promoting the installation of renewable energy sources in the country, and also with certain elements that are coming later on that I would like to refer to shortly. When they speak about the regulation for energy transition, obviously the Regulatory Commission has been working in different fronts, and for some years now, we have been trying to put in place a new regulatory approach where new business opportunities will be presented through proposals that come directly from the industry. By doing so, we have been talking about this in different fora and sector scenarios regarding aspects such as co-regulation and market performance rules. This goes back to 2019. But this is the foundation of what's coming next. And we have a new wave of regulation which is of paramount importance for the sector. The first thing that we are going to regulate in the coming months, we hopefully will have a resolution for the market which is linked to energy transition, and it's the new short-term market, intraday markets, where we hope to have a change towards binding transactions and for transaction prices to be known as of the day of the dispatch or even the day before, not as it is done today, that it's the day after. And this is going to enable us to introduce not only more efficiencies in the use of resources by the different generators, but we are also going to have the possibility of integrating demand as a fundamental actor in price setting and in short-term transactions. Today, let's recall that demand doesn't have that active participation. Demand is price taker in the energy stock exchange or through the contracts of traders in their energy purchasing processes. But what we were expecting with this short-term market scenario is for demand to have a more active participation, that you can offer demand deductions, that you can organize scenarios together with the industry if we are going to introduce the participation of demand in complementary services. So many of these things are going to be part of a dialogue with the industry, and it is a regulatory process that we'll have in the medium term, and hopefully it is going to be useful to all of us, and we can have those market guidelines working like that, at least for 2023, where we are expecting a strong penetration of generation plants with unconventional energy resources. For this resolution, it is worth highlighting the changes at the level of dispatch and redispatch. And this new breakdown, which has its base in the other plans, and it was left like in a more general scope through Resolution 60. For those generation plans with resources that are not managed by the generator, and some other resources that could appear in the future. For example, if we have other installations, using seawater. So that type of thing that could be introduced in the market. So the regulation is open to all those generation plans, so they could participate in different fields. So we have no rules for these resources. If it's not possible to store the resource as a primary resource, that is what we refer when he says that it's non-manageable. Obviously, generators need to manage this, and they need to have the knowledge about the resources and to manage the forecast for these resources on a daily basis. How important is that? That to the extent that we forecast and we know better about the resource with which we are generating, it is going to enable an adequate allocation of this in the energy stock exchange. That's why Resolution 60 is so important to us, because it brings in those conditions that, even though are specific, they do make a difference between the two types of resources, that it's manageable or that it could be stored, and the one that is not manageable. So different conditions are set forth for these resources, aiming at getting the conditions in order to enter into the world of binding transactions. And that is the transition we want with those measures. So we are going to have a market in which transitions are going to have known prices. But in addition to this, we're going to have the possibility of managing through intra-daily operations, and this will provide more efficiency to the market. As to the wholesale market, and that's what we're working on within the Commission, I think that we are all waiting for these changes that have been discovered for some years now. The idea is to have many proposals, and the idea is for 2021 to be very progressive regarding the regulatory aspect. Another important topic that is part of this year's agenda, which was subject to many comments and proposals by the energy transition process, is the topic that has to do with reliability charge. We have talked about the proposals of the advising committee, the possibility for the allocation to be done differently, to change the concept of reliability, linking it to long-term contracting. And this will be quite a change in the regulation. This structural change of reliability is not going to take place this year. It's not that CREC is not going to go over that. It's just that this year we have important challenges that I would like to refer to. These are short and middle term topics, but they are very important in the long term. And it is important for you to know what's in the agenda, which is the objective of CREC regarding those topics to be looked after. And I also would like to mention some important milestones that we have in the market, and they have to do with all the important sectors that of electric power, natural gas. The first thing is to talk about the possibility of counting with imported natural gas. Today, we have a regasification plant on the Caribbean region. It is located in Cartagena, which has some conditions regarding regulated charges, and also some energy allocated to some generators that backed up those obligations with imported natural gas. And that regulatory system expires in 2025. Hence, the Commission, why am I mentioning this first? Because there are some firm obligations related to that. Well, regasification needs to be looked over, and what's going to happen with the firm obligations, and mainly regarding what the Commission is going to review is to see if it should be a general review to cover those aspects related to regasification plants. And that's why I mentioned this topic, because it is linked to the energy and the gas sector. First thing is that we will have a discussion and an analysis on the best way in which this regasified gas of the Atlantic plant and on the future Pacific plant will be, I mean, we will have the allocation of that project. So if we are in a scenario of a new regasification plant, or also enlarging the import facilities, if someone could establish this, we have to see how that gas is going to be traded. And I'm talking about the gas coming from those regasification plants. That's an open topic for discussion. We have not made any decisions yet. It's just that we are going to propose a wholesale trading market, and we have the first draft document. And the feedback of all the agents, not only of the natural gas sector, but of the electricity sector, is going to enrich that discussion in order to prepare a regulatory proposal, which obviously will go first through a consultation process. But this framework of the gas wholesale trading is a topic that we have to go over in light of everything that is going to happen in the country with the potential offshore development, also with unconventional deposits. All these topics are being discussed now, and that's part of the gas supply project. And there is also a debate because it's that we not only required a regasification plant on the Pacific, but also an additional regasification plant on the Caribbean. All that needs to be analyzed by UPME. But what the Commission wants is to set the basis in order for that the trading of that gas will count on clear criteria, and not to launch a differentiated criteria for the different infrastructures to be developed in the country. These are discussions subject to debate, and obviously we will make the decisions when required. But that's a topic on the table, and it becomes very relevant given what I said in terms of reliability for 2025. Many people have asked about it. How is that going to be defined? That's part of the discussion that we'll have in the Commission and with market agents on how Are we going to support firm energy not only through imported gas with Caribbean regasification, but how are we going to work on the support, on the backup of firm energy? So obviously, we will need to have a preliminary discussion if we want to continue with the model as we have it today, or if we want to start migrating towards the proposed model or to any other reliability model to be defined, which could be better for Colombia. But until we have that discussion, we must not forget that 2025 is very close. That's 4 to 5 years. And hence, the decisions to be made regarding the continuity of this and if it's good for the system or not. And also those additional obligations for a certain period of time. I don't know how much, if it's 5 or 10 years. I do not have an answer now, but the model that will remain for these plants, and if there's going to be interest in declaring those firm energy obligations by those generators and also by other generators that could have access to imported gas facilities. That is something that we'll need to define. And also we need to define if the country needs additional expansions after 2025 or 2026. When this comes to an end, obviously we have to take into account different scenarios. I mean, for example, the commissioning of different projects, install capacity with unconventional renewable sources. Also, the valuation of firm energy, if we're going to migrate to value firm energy, not only individually by plants. Well, all this is going to be part of the discussion. And I insist on the fact that we will have a preliminary discussion to see what's the model to be put in place. We have not decided on structural changes. It's just the need of knowing what's going to happen with that firm energy after 2025, when there is an expiration of the obligations allocated. Moreover, everything that has to do with those allocations regarding gas regasification of LNG that affect many aspects that I have already mentioned. Everything that is related to reliability charge, allocation of firm energy obligations, and obviously part of what we are going to review is if we are going to adopt some possibilities that have been previously studied with some variables that may arise from the suggestions received in the proposals, and that it's going to be part of a consultation. But what's going to happen with the allocation methodology for the existing plants in the system, taking into account that the thermal group are also part of existing plants. So we'll have to see how are we organizing this system. I'm not saying that everything is going to be the same or that we're going to go through drastic changes. All that is being analyzed, and it is important for the industry to know about this and to prepare themselves. And we should get proposals from the industry in order to achieve a reliability required by the system at efficient cost in order for users to benefit for that efficient cost to be paid for the service. So these are decisions that need to be made in the short and medium term. Most likely, some decisions are going to be made vis-a-vis the need of counting on additional auctions or not, and that's going to be informed shortly once we have the different consultations. that is part of the agenda for 2021, and we hope we'll achieve that progress. There is an important topic that stems from all these topics that I have just mentioned, and that is the topic, related to gas. I know that I've been invited to talk about generation, but without any doubt, the gas market affects what happens with the generation market in Colombia. That's why I have mentioned this. But there is a topic that, in spite of the fact that we are issuing the final one within the Commission, we have defined the methodology for gas transportation, and it's going to be released shortly, and it's called the transition methodology. Why the transition methodology? Because the gas market in Colombia is going to change significantly. We're going to go from concentrated sources, gas reduction, that's Guajira and the foothill, and this has been changing lately. We see how Córdoba and Sucre have developed important blocks with important production figures. It is consolidated as an important gas source in the country, and there is much expectation with what could happen with unconventionals in the mid-Magdalena Valley and in other parts of the country, and also the offshore part. And because of all this, the gas market and the gas methodology, as we had been analyzing in the Commission, it's just necessary to go over this so that when this becomes a reality. When are these products becoming a reality? According to the best estimates, we have that by 2025 and 2026, we will have these new gas sources in the market. And even after those dates, for example, offshore is for 2028, 2029. Those are the best estimates that we have. So we still have some uncertainty about it, but anyhow, this gas sector development will give rise to a very different dynamics, and most likely the methodology that we are using is not going to give the adequate signs for that gas exchange among the different market agents. So we need to migrate to a different methodology, and that's part of an assessment that we'll conduct this year. So this year, we're going to carry out important gas-related studies and also transportation methodology, which will not be approved in coming years, but it is the start of the analysis required for that important methodological change. That is moving from one methodology to another one that will not be based on the distance, but will be more adequate for the future development of the gas market. That is what we are asking consultants for. They've been invited to participate in this consultancy process. And we are asking to propose a methodology that will adjust more to the reality that we are expecting in 2025 and onwards. It is there where we will define a new gas transportation methodology. Well, I've talked about the trading in the wholesale market, and now we are going to the electricity sector. So I've talked also about what's expected regarding reliability charge and also the binding dispatch. And also what about prices? CREC has been working in the price part. We are also going to conduct a study now where we are going to try and land in the proposal presented by consultants. We're going to adjust it to the reality of the Colombian market.
We will be asking consultants to make a proposal of how the mathematical model would be for the optimization and fixing of nodal prices, but also as it's been stated in previous studies by some of them and some companies, they could also lay out what that transition would be like at normal prices, but also include things like transfer of final prices, energy contracting, all those aspects that are linked to the short-term transaction. We will ask this consultative group to analyze that for us. And hopefully this will be completed by the end of the second semester. We're already finding the consultants, and this will be a study where the industry will be interacting with the consultants in order to get acquainted with the proposals and to discuss the different choices that may be out there. So that's where we're going with nodal prices. The mechanism that is being proposed for intraday mechanisms leaves a possibility open for later on in time migrate to a scheme of nodal prices smoothly, being able to go through that transition to the model or scheme of nodal prices in a less upsetting or distorting manner, that there will be a transition and this transition will have some incidence in that the transition to nodal prices will not be traumatic, and it'll be smoothly achieved in 3, 4, or 5 years. But we have to start this study as the transformation mission advised us to. It was not a determining recommendation. They said that the feasibility should be examined in the Colombian market in some scenario where the day-to-day use is done based on a scheme of nodes or nodal prices or allocation of prices based on nodes instead of how it is being done at present. So that's the issue that is on the table for the second semester. We will be carrying out these different studies, and naturally we will continue working, and we are very close to coming up with proposals. The regulation around the transition has already had some temporary measures that have been adopted, but what we hope to get this year is that the regulation will be updated, not only regarding the commercial aspects that I mentioned already, but that we will be also updating for all these new operating conditions and criteria of flexibility in the operation, and that the market will be much more resilient by involving new concepts in the planning stages, looking at the medium and long term, so that all these new generation resources that are flowing into the system will shorten these transition to the extent possible, while also keeping a reliable and safe system in place and giving us the opportunity to learn from other places around the world vis-a-vis the way in which a system must be prepared so that the transition towards the new technologies and the system operation takes place with the penetration of these new technologies that implies different conditions from the traditional sources, that this will happen in a reliable manner. So we are very close to putting on the table a study on the drip codes This is a very technical document. It's very technical regulation that defines the different conditions of operation of our system. But it's something that has to be brought up to date, following the best international practices and learning from all the international experiences, looking at the good things and trying to avoid the problems that they have bumped into in those other latitudes. So Colombia must capitalize on that learning to its own benefit. So we are close to achieving that. And at last, I just want to revert to something, and it is that we're hoping to gradually become more up-to-date in different technologies regulated by the Commission, by Craig. We hope to make progress this year on putting the discussion of the electric power transmission methodology. So everything that happens around this area should be the concern of all the companies linked to the sector. So we're modernizing that transportation methodology or transmission methodology to set the basis for the updated methodology, hopefully this year. Gas transportation, we have already put on the table a proposal for an update. And in the electric sector, we are going back to this discussion, and this also has to do with the generators, the transfer of the cost of the purchase of energy, and the mechanisms of marketing and how they will be involved in these transfer in the one pillar tariff and the way in which this is reflected. So we are going to have a review of those technologies, the unit cost on the one hand, focusing on the review of the methodology, the marketing cost on the other hand, but more or beyond the methodology and the number that we arrive at, what's important is to underline the vision at the Commission that comes back from the base document from Craig in 2019. We want to see a transition towards a more competitive market on the basis of these new measurement technologies, advanced measuring systems, which, by the way, we are close to issuing the final resolution in this regard. And for this implementation, in order to meet the goals set by the national government for the year 2030, plus everything that this entails, which is a bigger possibility for users to have access to competitive prices. So we hope to be able to review aspects that have much to do with the audience in this Congress. If we still have to continue with the size-based regulation or classification between the regulated and the unregulated, what are the requirements to access the regulated market, or if with these new technologies we can go to measurement systems that will give us many different facilities in the wholesale market. So look at how that transition should take place, and the marketing costs, and how would we shape that segment. And looking at the regulated market, how would the tariff be defined for that segment? This is a very broad analysis that has to be made. There are international experiences that have to be looked at, some good, some not so good, but we have to compile all of those in order to be able to have a transition towards a more open, more competitive market, giving more efficiencies to the users without forgetting our country's reality, in that we have users that probably will not be accessing those competitive markets because of their conditions of vulnerability or many other reasons. Therefore, we have to look for a solution that couples better with the reality of our country so that all those that can benefit from competitiveness can do so, but without affecting to a large extent the users that can have no access to those mechanisms of competition. So regarding the topics that I just mentioned, studies will be carried out in the second semester of this year. To make decisions throughout the years 2022 and some of them 2023. These analyses of how will the market be regulated in the future will come from the analysis of whether more progress can be made in the penetration of competition or in the growth of the unregulated market by diminishing those margins, or why not? As I have mentioned, a choice that could be looked at, an alternative would be to be able to get to the non-regulated market. Of course, this will all be discussed, and we look forward to your participation. I hope I was able to summarize all the aspects that we at the Commission are working on. Oh, and I left out something which has an impact on the market. We're expecting to see a demand growth associated to that segment if we have a more effective or efficient management of energy. Our goal is that an efficient management of energy will continue because the electrification of the economy in some aspects we hope to continue seeing as drivers of growth for electricity demand. We, on our part, are working on a preliminary study regarding these new business opportunities, these new business expectations, the electrification of the economy. What would the Commission be contributing there, regulating which aspects? Looking at the service that will be provided. And very surely we will have to review what is going to happen with the grids, the loads, and a number of aspects where we will have to see how far will competition come to the Commission, or if there's additional competition, we will have to regulate those aspects. But we are in the midst of developing those analyses, but we have to be clear that the future, as seen by the Commission, is very different from what we envisage today, not only regarding the new technologies that may come up, but also because of the vision that the sector needs to develop new areas of business based on these technologies that will provide energy at lower costs.
But we want to set some bases and have more flexible markets that will not depend on a technology, or the delivery of the services will depend only on a technology, but it's about the characteristics to be delivered in the service, and this way everything will join the market to the extent that they will not affect others, that will not restrict competition, that will not create inefficiencies in price setting. So with no further ado, I would like to thank you for your attention.